The other day, I looked at the 3 teams that came into Formula 1 for the 2010 season and talked about how they are pretty much the benchmark for any new team that enters thereafter. And I also talked about how the fact that 2 of them lasted as long as they did was quite impressive in itself, because there were promises that were made that never came to fruition. There was this, there was that, and, well, all 3 went under within 7 years. And one of the repeated comments on that video was, shouldn't Haas be the benchmark instead? But the thing is, the bad will always be seen more than the good. Bad reviews of a product on Amazon or a piece of software on Steam will always stick out more than the good ones. Especially the ones that say, do not buy this product, and they've given it a 1-star review, when there's 997,000 4- and 5-star reviews. The product isn't bad, Karen, you just got the literal 1 in a million duff one. Anyway, back to the motorsport stuff, because Andretti is in the news once again, and it refuses to go away. But this time, while it looks like the FIA has approved their entry, there are a couple more obstacles that they need to overcome. And apologies if I look a bit rough today, I really am rough. I don't know what it is. I just feel dead. On the 2nd of October 2023, the FIA greenlit Andretti, subject to a deal struck with the commercial rights owners. And it has been well known for some time that the other teams have been in opposition of this, from Red Bull at the top to Williams at the back, because they're seeing the potential earnings in prize money dropping. Something that shouldn't really concern the likes of Red Bull or Mercedes or Ferrari with the money they already get from prize money, sponsorships and so on, but for Williams, well, they kind of do have a point. The only team on the grid that was initially in favour of Andretti arriving was Renault, well, Alpine, and that's due to engine supply. Even McLaren, which has Zach Brown involved and is also a great friend of Andretti, he was against it. And initially, Renault was going to supply Andretti's F1 outfit with the power units, which would greatly help them as they are the only single team supplier on the grid. To themselves, as it so happens. With the GM backing, Andretti was expected to have Renault's engines then badged with one of GM's brands. In this case, Cadillac. Which raises a valid point, because someone in one of the many comments sections said, well, shouldn't GM be building its own engine instead? But it does make more sense and is more cost effective to Andretti and to GM to take Renault's engine, use it for a bit, learn as much as they can about it, and then use GM's vast wealth and resources to build their own. A bit like how Audi is doing, but Audi is coming straight in with theirs and spending their vast wealth to do that instead. But Audi already has the hybrid know-how from the LMP1 days. GM doesn't really have that. Alright, there is the hypercar stuff they can draw on, but I think the hybrid in hypercars is a parity part, a part used on every car, so every car is the same. So like I said, use somebody else's blueprints, get something working, go from there. Maybe once GM and Andretti have been around for a while, they can make their own using what they've learned from Renault. And they'll also be looking at what happened with Honda when they came back with McLaren as a warning from history. Because what would be the point in GM building something so expensive to then spend the next, 5 years catching up to Honda and Mercedes? But there seems to be an issue with all of this engine stuff. Renault had initially offered a pre-contract to Andretti to supply the engines, but that expired 2 days ago, and the talks haven't resumed. But the FIA is adamant that Andretti will get engines if they make it onto the grid. Mohammed Ben Sulayem has made it very clear that the sporting regulations in Formula 1 mean that no team will be without something to power the cars. The long-term aim was always for GM to build something, and as already mentioned, they wanted to learn as much as they could from Renault engines and then build their own. Now, it appears, they might have to rush something together. It means that GM has from now until the start of 2025 to get an engine together, but that's not enough time, even for a manufacturer as big as they are. But there is an option available to them. They can ask the manufacturer supplying the least amount of teams to come to their aid, which at the minute are Honda and Renault. But what about Audi, I hear you cry? Well, Audi's going to be in for 2026, and even then they can't supply Andretti because they're a brand new OEM into the sport, or a brand new engine manufacturer into the sport, which means for a set amount of time they can only supply one team, which will be their own team that they're taking over from Alfa Romeo. So it's going to be like Alba, Audi, and whatever it is. But the way the rules are written, GM basically has that option to say, look, we can't get an engine built in time, so the FIA will basically take Honda and Renault, put their names into a hat, pick one at random, and whoever is picked out is obliged to supply engines. And Renault has said, if it comes to that, we will do that. But Sulayem and Stefano Domenicali seem to be on opposite sides of things. Recently, Sulayem said that F1 should have fewer races and more teams, but Domenicali seems to think the opposite. cram as much stuff into the season as possible for the TV revenue, and screw everything and everybody else. All of this being stuff that I've covered before, and also a problem that other sports are seeing now. This thing of more events equals better product. It doesn't. International breaks and all that stuff. Get rid of it. Admittedly, I've been in the Andretti needs to add something camp for some time, but when I say they need to bring something, I mean they need to be able to compete with the likes of Alfa Romeo, Williams and Haas, and not be half a second or so behind them with no chance of finishing ahead of them, save for some sort of failure or large accident taking them out. There are too many people out there who are, America bad, can only turn left, keep America out of our sport, and so on. It's quite childish, really. In 2023, every single team on the grid is capable of scoring points. Every single team this season has points on the board, even if not all the drivers have one. If Andretti can be in that, then go for it. Haas scored points on their debut, so Andretti will be looking at that and thinking, we can definitely do that. And the FIA seems convinced that this is the case as well, and they are willing for Andretti to get out there and compete. But there's still the obstacles of engine supply and the negotiations with FOM regarding the actual getting onto the grid thing. If Andretti wants to get the Honda or Alpine supply, it has to make this clear to the FIA before the 1st of July next year and hope that the sorting hat picks Honda. Maybe it's a good thing that Ford will be coming in 2026 and therefore won't be able to supply them. Could you imagine if Alpine, Honda and Ford and Audi had all gone into the same hat, they'd done the little rummaging around thing, pulled the name out, and oh, it's Ford. Ford's got to supply the car that's got Cadillac stickers all over it. But at the same time, I'm glad the FIA is saying we need fewer races and more teams. An American team in a completely European series with a large European backbone would probably do more for growing the sport in America than 2 vanity races in Miami and Las Vegas would. Because, well, look at that NASCAR car that turned up at Le Mans this year. That thing drew more than a late 90s pro wrestling fight between The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. That thing was cool, and there were a lot of Americans that loved seeing it outperform the GTL Enfield, even if they didn't quite all understand that it wasn't operating to the same rulebook. And most importantly, it looks like Sulayem is thinking of the sport before the money, unless this is just a good cop moment from the FIA so that if it all does go under, he can say, oh, well, I tried. And talking to the BBC, Sulayem said that the rules currently allow for 12 teams and the sport would benefit from having manufacturers. The term OEM is often used here, which stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer, basically factory-backed entries. The FIA should be asking, begging OEMs to come in, Sulayem said. Why shouldn't we just say no to them? If you say, what is my dream, it is to fill up the 12 team slots and have one US team from an OEM, a power unit and a driver from there, and then go to China maybe and ask for the same thing and do it. Some of the teams said, oh, it will be crowded. Really? We're already running a Hollywood team with us. We are not a service provider. We own the championship. We leased it. We are the landlord, so that has to be respected too. It's a 100-year lease, apparently. I think it was cooked up by Mosley and Eccleston back in the day. But there is still that final hurdle that Andretti will need to jump through, and that is getting the support of the other teams who will no doubt be pointing to the Concord Agreement and saying this, that and the other as a way of getting the thing rejected. Now, the other teams don't actually have a formal say in whether Andretti makes it, but they are certainly trying to pressure it in that direction. So it's down to Domenicali and co, really. So with 2 OEMs on the grid for 2026, Audi and Ford, and the potential for a third one, manufacturer involvement back in Formula 1 at a level not seen for 20 years or so, that's going to only be a good thing, right? Because as it stands at the minute, if you're talking about manufacturer involvement in a top level sport, endurance racing is really the pinnacle there. So then, a very quick video on the latest development with the Andretti entry and the obstacles that they still have yet to overcome. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so the algorithm can do its thing, and for more things like this, subscribe to this thing and click the bell button thing so you never miss out on any future videos. Massive thanks, as always, to the patrons and channel members who support this channel at a more personal level, and if you do want to join in with that kind of thing, there is a link to Patreon in the description, the buttons to super thanks, and to join as a member underneath the video, and there's also a link to the F1 store in the description too, so if you buy something through there, I get an itty-bitty kickback, and there's Discord and social links in there too. I think that's everything, so until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and I'm going back to bed. Goodbye. you.